govern.
So sometimes on this podcast, we've done, a debrief of a Smarter Everyday episode, like how I arrived at my conclusions and things like that. But I'll be honest with you, I think the ratio of people in the third chair here is probably 50-50 religious, not religious. And
yeah, that's about how I'd read it.
Well, let's be serious, dude. I mean, you're doing Bible on the internet. I mean, that's not the most popular topic. But we see often enough in the feedback, people are saying, well, hey, I'm not scared of learning about this stuff. Just talk about it so I can learn about it. And I think this topic today is interesting because you learned about this guy from the Bible in a really interesting way. And so would you do me the honor of just explaining here in a few minutes why you decided to study this topic that you did on 10-Minute Bible Hour, Pontius Pilate?
Yeah, and I'm honored that you're interested in that you want to compare notes in what our processes even look like. History is a different animal. So yeah, talk about Pilate, and we'll talk about how you do the work and learn stuff about it. It'll be fun. Let's
do it. This is more of a meat and potatoes kind of episode, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. So I don't know how we can frame it any other way, but it's well prepared meat and potatoes, I'd like to think.
Let's go. This episode's sponsored by HelloFresh.
See what we did? That's not what we did.
Have you ever done Pilates?
No, absolutely not. I don't even really know what those are. You?
Never. Okay, moving on to number 2.
Great.
What about Pilate? Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. I've learned a lot of things about Pilate. You mean Pontius Pilate, the Roman Procurator who was responsible for the execution of Jesus of Nazareth around 30 A.D.? Him?
Let me just check notes. Yeah, that's what my notes say. Yes.
Yeah, him. I know some stuff about that. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, let's do it. Because that's the video that you did recently, right?
Yeah. That is the hardest I've ever worked on a video in terms of sheer time and research. It was a beast, man.
So I think the thing that's most interesting about it is I was talking to you as you were working on this, and you put in as much research into this as I would expect a graduate level person to put into some kind of big paper they were publishing. This was serious. This was serious work that you did.
This was more work than either of my graduate theses.
Really?
Yep.
Dang.
Well, and here's part of the difference. When I produced those capstone projects for my post-college degrees, I had to defend that in front of 2 or maybe 3 people, and they were smart and nice, but they only sort of cared because deep down they knew no one was ever going to read those works, ever. They were going to get published and bound up and put in a library, and no one would ever look. So they were peer-reviewed, but not at the level I knew this Pontius Pilate thing was going to get peer-reviewed. Does that make sense?
Meaning thousands upon thousands of people would be watching the video, and they would be looking for holes in your research just to execute you publicly.
Right. When I did a project on the advent of television in the 1950s in the Midwest and how that changed culture and connectedness in rural Nebraska and made them feel more like a part of a larger thing that was going on.
What was that for? Was that for your master's thesis?
That was for, my second round of grad school.
Just to be clear, in what school and what program were you in?
That was UNK, University of Nebraska at Kearney.
Uh-huh.
And that was a project I did as a part of my degree in history of the West and Western thought.
Okay, and what was the official title of the thesis?
Oh, I think I remember. I think it was Powering Up the Antenna on the Great Plains, and then colon and a whole bunch of words that sound official, but I can't remember the second part of the title. It was cool. I went and did all this original research. All of the people who worked on bringing television to Nebraska had either recently died or were getting close to dying. And I went and found all of these people. I found the on-air personalities from 1954. I went and found people who bought television sets as soon as they came out and interviewed them to hear their recollection of what it was like to see the TV crate getting offloaded from the train and then them buying it and setting it up in their house and all of their neighbors gathering around every night until finally they had to tell them to back off, and all of these cool little anecdotes about you watching the clumsiness of trying to handle these live broadcasts and queuing up the tape and all of this stuff. I got stories about people seeing the Willie Mays catch. You remember the Willie Mays catch?
The catch. Yes.
Yeah, people saw that on TV. I got stories, that was a little bit later, but people saw that on TV. People watched, one of the first things that happened on television after it came to central Nebraska was the McCarthy Trials. You remember what those were about?
Yes, I do.
And so it was really interesting to talk to all of these old timers who were remembering what it was like to first be connected on the national level. And the very first thing they get is just miserable divisiveness. People cannibalizing each other in Washington. And so it kind of had a repulsive effect to a lot of the people I spoke to, because they were like, why would I want to use my TV for this?
Well, what year was this? I mean, we're talking 50s, 40s?
1954.
1954. Mm-hmm. And so that was black and white TV. The television screens were circular at that time, if I recall.
Color TV was just starting to happen, but that was a luxury few could afford when all of this, started getting fired up.
Did you see Derek from Veritasium's video on the history of video?
My goodness, that was excellent.
It was an excellent video, man. I mean, he talked about the
wonderful.
The Imicon tube was where was the Imicon? No, Imicon is a super high-speed framing camera. Dang, what's it called? It was a tube, but anyway, the IMI is it's a, I don't know, what do you call it? It's a derivative of the term for this tube. I want to say Imicon tube. I may be wrong about that. But anyway, so Emmy Awards come from that particular cathode ray tube design.
And I did not know that until I watched that video.
I thought it was great.
Those are the kind of things that you do kind of pick up along the way. Like, where a Grammy gets its nickname. You've picked up that data along the way.
Gramophone?
Yeah, it's a gramophone. I mean, that's why they hand them gramophones. I saw a picture of Weird Al throwing like 5 of them in the trash to make room for the new one that he got this time around.
Was he just being sarcastic, just being funny?
Oh, I'm sure Weird Al didn't throw those away. They're hard to get. Yeah, he was goofing.
Okay.
But Emmy, I just never thought about where that name came from. And then I watched that video, and I thought, hey, Derek, I'm learning things. Thank you. You're making my life better. This is what I want from educational programming on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm looking up. Orthicon tube was the original one. Man, it's not in the video description notes on there. But anyway, yeah, great video. Totally should go see that. I'll put a link down in the notes. Or
Sweet.
Actually, Tina will. I won't do it.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you, Tina.
I'm not lifting a finger to put that in your dirty notes.
No, Tina's just better than me. She's a better person than me.
Well, go on.
Yeah, it's true.
So yeah, this was it was a really fun project, right? And I went and did a ton of original research. Nobody had told this story. The TV station that was the first one to come to Nebraska, it's still in existence. And I have a good buddy, Steve White, who worked for that station forever. He and I worked at church together and traveled all around the world with kids. And we've just done some really cool stuff together. He's very good at his job. You know how a lot of times you get, I don't know, local reporters, they're kind of rookies and it doesn't always go the best, but you can tell they're kind of learning on the job, and it's kind of like the minor leagues.
Yeah.
That is not the case with Steve.
He just knows what's up. He's good. He's
really sharp guy, and he's just decided, like, I'm going to be a Central Nebraskan. I'm going to plug in with this community. I'm going to like it. I'm going to raise my family here. I'm going to know the politicians and he's like an old-timey journalist who does it right.
God.
But he does it at a relatively small station in a town.
I crave that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
the trusted
legit.
guy in your hometown that's going to get it right, That's just brilliant.
When I met him, I think he's a Bison. I think he went to North Dakota State. I think he went to North Dakota.
How do you say that?
No.
Hold on,
No. He's not a Bison. He's a South Dakota guy.
No. Go back to that word. How do you say that word?
Oh, you caught that. Yeah, if you talk with people from North Dakota and you pronounce their
Bison?
School mascot as the Bison, you are wrong. It's the Bison, as though there's a Z in it.
But there's not a Z. There's an S.
Yeah, it's an S.
Yeah, so why do you pronounce it like there's a Z in it?
I don't know. Why do people pronounce things the way they pronounce things all around the country? It's all weird.
That's interesting.
Like, speaking of Nebraska, they have a town in Nebraska that is spelled Cairo. How would you pronounce that?
Cairo.
Yeah, that's correct, but you're wrong. It's Cairo.
Really?
Yeah, do you know why?
No, I don't.
Me neither. I have no idea, but that's just what they do. So
the USS Cairo was an ironclad ship that was sunk in near Vicksburg, and they brought it up.
The USS Cairo? Yeah, actually.
What's interesting is the crane ship that actually pulled it up out of the bottom of the river was also named the Cairo.
Really?
Yeah, it was interesting. I have no idea why I know this. Yeah.
That's good stuff to know. I didn't know where
you never know when you need to know this stuff.
Yeah, pick up all these little trivia bits. So, no, Steve went to South Dakota State, and same place that Adam Vinatieri, the kicker, went to. That's how I remember where he went to school. And so when I met Steve, he was like fresh out of college, journalist, whatever, baby faced and all of this stuff, and he's still there. Dude's getting a few little flecks of gray in the hair and in the beard, and that's a gift to a community when you have trusted local news who don't do sensationalist stuff, but they do legitimate research and homework. And so it's been fun to see him succeed and to see him, like, as a journalist, serve a community for a big chunk of time. And so what was fun about this graduate work that I did is that it was with his station. So I was able to give them at the end, like, hey, here's a history of your station you didn't know you had, and it's all bundled up, and there it is. So a few people actually read it, and I think appreciated it because it told a story that would have been lost if we'd waited even another year or two to try to tell it. We wouldn't have been able to get all that information rounded up. So it was fun.
Nice. Sweet.
But nothing like Pilate.
Yeah.
Pilate was a monster.
Yeah, that was a lot to say. You worked hard on a video.
Yeah, but that was fun, right? We talked about journalism.
Yeah,
and
it was
Bison
fun, of course.
It's worth it. Okay.
So here's the deal with Pilate. Being your buddy and just externally observing your life, I would call you and be like, hey, what's up, man? Oh, man, I just recently discovered that Pilate's wife used this brand of pantyhose, and
it's like a direct quote.
Which is interesting because, it was before they came in the little plastic eggs, and I didn't realize that. Every time I would call, you would be like this madman who was having some deep philosophical connection with the historical character in a way that, is interesting, but nobody ever... Really, it sounded like, no, seriously, like there was this painting in Switzerland, right? And something about a fountain, and he washes his hands as a ghost. And I was like, Matt, what are you smoking, dude? It was very interesting.
That's an actual story. That's an actual local legend.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
About the ghost thing.
So,
okay, all right, cool.
So let me just ask some questions. So Pontius Pilate is this dude in the Bible, and I think he's kind of getting a bad rap, personally. I kind of empathize with the guy because Jesus is put on trial. It's a mock trial. The Israelites that are I don't know if they're technically Israelites at the time. They're just this religious group, the Jews, at this point in time. Mm-hmm. They want to crucify Jesus for blasphemy. And Pilate's like, I've interviewed this guy, and he seems pretty cool. And maybe not cool. Maybe he's just a little crazy. But there's
maybe a little overstatement, but indifference maybe.
Indifference. Okay. So I've interviewed this guy, and I don't think he's guilty. How about that? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, we want to kill him. And Pilate comes up with this plan. He's like, well, okay, clearly these people are just bloodthirsty at this point in time. Maybe if I do this little tradition that they do, and I offer up this other dude, Barabbas, maybe they'll take Barabbas, because traditionally we let one person off the hook. So maybe if I put Jesus and Barabbas up here, they'll just select Barabbas, and this Jesus guy won't get crucified, and it'll be done. And they pick Jesus, right? No, we want to kill Jesus.
Right.
And then Pilate does something that's fascinating to me. He gets a bowl of water, and he's like, hey, I'm going to wash my hands of, this guy's blood is on you. And to me, that's interesting. And I'm reading the story in the Bible, and I'm like, okay, cool. Pilate gets it, and he's saying this guy is not guilty of the crimes that they're accusing him of. But then here we are thousands of years later, and in the Apostles' Creed, Pilate's name is mentioned. Can you quote the Apostles' Creed?
Mostly, but I'm not going to try it because I'm going to embarrass myself.
Apostles, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, I always read the lyrics when we do it in church.
I do too.
I act like I know, but I'm secretly peeking.
Yeah, I'm secretly peeking as well. Okay, so let's. I'm just going to pull up the Apostles' Creed. It's in Latin. No, we're not going to do this. Okay.
I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ,
God's only Son, our Lord.
Did you find it?
I did. I found it.
Okay, go ahead.
Who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, who, by the way, in the Apostles' Creed Wikipedia article, is the only person that has a link. Suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended to the dead. This is a little different than the way we say it in church. On the third day he rose again. He ascended into heaven. He is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church. In our church, we say the Holy Christian Church. The communion of the saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. And so this Apostles' Creed, I'm sure there's a historical genesis of this Apostles' Creed, but pretty much anybody that says that you agree to, most of the tenets of the Christian faith, you would be able to recite the Apostles' Creed in good faith.
Yeah, with only maybe slight nuance or characterization, like what does Catholic mean? Is that an acknowledgement of Roman authority, or do we use that in the sense of the word universal? So a Roman Catholic will capitalize the letter C. A non-Roman Catholic might make that lowercase, meaning as to indicate this is just a universal expression of Christianity. But yeah, it's pretty dang tight, and it's kind of the boundary markers for what is and isn't orthodoxy within Christianity.
Okay, so looking at this Apostles' Creed, there are, let's see, we're just going to look at humans in the Apostles' Creed. We've got Jesus Christ.
That one makes sense.
We have Mary.
To be expected.
And we have Pontius Pilate.
And record scratch.
Yeah, to me, that's weird because Pilate got out a bowl of water and he was like, I'm going to wash my hands of this moment. This is on you. But here in the Apostles' Creed, no, we're very firmly pinning this on him, which is interesting to me. So, Matt, you have spent weeks and weeks and weeks researching, months researching Pontius Pilate. So, yeah. If I may kind of frame my job in this discussion, you're very, very close to the trees. You're in the forest. You are like, you are living in the woods.
Kind of like where you were with Facebook. Bernie Sanders' hair, lab coat.
Yes.
Dry ice bubbling in the background. Yeah.
So my job in this discussion is I'm going to try to pull you out of the deep places and give me more of a top-level view and help me understand who Pontius Pilate is. So, Matt, who is Pontius Pilate?
I can do this. Okay, Pontius Pilate is a guy from Samnia, which is a region just east of Rome. He's from an ancient family that had been a nuisance to the Romans for centuries prior to the first century when we get to Jesus. And he's a guy with a really underwhelming resume who probably, all things equal, would not have received his appointment as governor of Judea if it weren't for some sweetheart connections in Rome or maybe a shared agenda with some people in Rome. And so he comes from total obscurity in the lower ranking upper classes, like a knight, to ascend to this position. He follows a guy named Gratus who had been there for 10 years, which is really good for a governor.
Okay, I'm gonna pause.
He lands in this difficult spot. Am I coming out of the trees?
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna pause you real quick. So first of all, Rome at the time,
yes,
is a government.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
No, I mean, you're laughing at me, but
government.
I'm being serious. I'm backing up. So Rome is a government.
Okay.
And and there
Sorry,
are
I didn't mean to laugh at you.
There are states in Rome, or there are city states, or what are the divisions of government in Rome at that point in time, geographically speaking?
That's a dang good question. City-states are more associated with Greece. Like Athens was a city-state, Sparta. A lot had happened between then and the classic Roman Empire. So what we talk about now would be client-king states. In other words, Rome goes out, they conquer somebody, but it's really tough, learning lessons from history, to send out your army and Roman governors to take over and completely occupy these people with an entirely foreign government. What they figured out is it is way easier to collect taxes and keep peace if you have a partnership government where the Roman representative is there, but also there's an indigenous representative who understands local customs and law and religion and things like that, and they kind of work in partnership with the Roman governor being the more authoritative of the two if push comes to shove. So this is called a client-king state, and both Judea and Galilee at different times were client-king states of Rome. So fully under the banner of the Roman Empire, kind of like we have states in the United States, I guess. But whereas in the United States, theoretically, the governors are legitimate powers, there the indigenous governors would be more of a concession to keep the peace. Does that make sense?
So this is like Puerto Rico.
This
is Roman Puerto Rico is where we're at.
Sure.
Language is a little bit different.
Uh-huh.
There's a governor, but they don't have do they have the full rights of Roman citizenship?
If you're a Roman citizen, you do. But to become a Roman citizen, it's not like you pass a 400-question test and go to a few classes. It was a pretty special title to achieve. That's why most of the Jewish characters that we encounter in the New Testament are not Roman citizens, with one really obvious exception.
So Pilate's role, if I understand you correctly, is he is in this extended area of the Roman Empire, and he's the governor over these people who aren't necessarily walking around speaking Latin.
Oh, no, definitely not walking around speaking Latin. Some people, I guess, would have a sense of that for legal or trade purposes, but in the Eastern Mediterranean, the lingua franca was Greek, but even in Judea, Greek would have been a secondary language. Aramaic is what most people would have been functioning in.
So for the most part, he is at this extended place, and he's trying to keep the peace.
Keep the peace and collect taxes. That's his job.
This episode of No Questions is sponsored by HelloFresh, which is a meal kit delivery service that helps you cook, eat, and enjoy by sending you prepackaged ingredients, everything you need to make an incredible meal all by yourself, right there at the kitchen. You get to cook.
Yeah, my two favorite things about this is that I get to participate in making the meal, and therefore I learn things and I feel ownership of this. And the other thing is that it tastes very good, which, as I've mentioned before, is very important to me when it comes to food.
What I like about it is they have a simple instruction sheet that comes with every package. And sometimes, like if the kids go over to my mom's house or something like that, we'll send a HelloFresh meal over there, and the instructions and everything. But it's just very simple, easy to follow instructions, and then you can make an incredible meal all by yourself. I love it.
Yeah, it's paint by number ease with, for me at least, the gourmet level deliciousness. That is far better than anything else that I prepare myself. Pushes my limits a little bit. I get flavors I would never, I just wouldn't think to try the things that HelloFresh sends me. And then I love literally every single meal I've had from them. I've absolutely loved.
Oh, yeah.
It's about half an hour for you. Is that your time frame on this?
Yeah, half an hour, depending on the recipe. Some of them you can cook everything in one pan. Others maybe takes two pans, or maybe if you got to put some like tortillas in the oven or something like that. For the most part, it's easy cleanup as well. So you should give it a shot. For $80 off your first month of HelloFresh, go to HelloFresh.com/NDQ80 and enter the code NDQ80 at checkout.
I've been getting some feedback from people who have ordered steak-based HelloFresh recipes, knowing that that is my favorite thing that they do.
Yeah?
Everything I've had that involves beef really stands out for me. I'm kind of a connoisseur, kind of into it. And I'm kind of a snob about beef because I live in Wyoming and it's on a ranch central, and so I get this stuff really fresh.
Yeah.
And it is spectacular. It's great meat. So if you're a meativore like me, this is going to work for you. But it also works for people who are not meativores like me. There are veggie-heavy options and even vegetarian options that you can go for. But obviously, I enjoy talking steak.
I just realized the meat is not frozen when it shows up at the house, is it? It's just refrigerated.
Yep.
Huh.
And you know how when you get meat out of the package and you're like, this is exactly ready to cook?
Yeah.
You just picture it working. That's how it comes every time. They've really got the how to get this from their facility to your door thing dialed. So again, for $80 off your first month of HelloFresh, go to HelloFresh.com/NDQ80 and enter NDQ80 and try something with steak.
It's well, I don't know, man. The chicken and pork's pretty good too. I enjoy it.
You're making great points. You're not going to go wrong with anything.
HelloFresh.com/NDQ80, NDQ80 at checkout. Thank you to everyone who supports the sponsors, because when you do that, you're also supporting us and you help us make this podcast. Thank you so much.
Destin, is it okay if we get back to me uncomfortably obsessing about an obscure character from the 1st century AD?
It is kind of cute the way you do this. I mean, like you're in the zone. It's good. It's really good. I enjoy it.
I like this stuff.
I like that you get into things just like I get into things.
Yeah. Awfully different things. You're being a good sport. Thank you. Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring the show. More Pontius Pilate.
So I guess that means that Pilate is extended in this Puerto Rico area of Rome. people are speaking a different language, but he's still trying to make people in Rome happy. Like, he's trying to make the government back home happy, correct?
Yeah, and we could say that for sure just because, by merit of him being a Roman governor, but there's this little bit of political intrigue that I don't think gets us too far into the forest that is really crucial information that doesn't come up unless you look close, and it has to do with the reign of the Emperor Tiberius. Do you remember the name of the first emperor of Rome?
Julius Caesar?
Nope, Julius Caesar was not an emperor of Rome. He was a part of a leadership group called the Triumvirate, along with the very famous Pompey. But all those guys died. That destabilized things. And there's a big civil war scramble for power that happens in the late 1st century BC. And the guy who comes out winning is Julius Caesar's godson, Octavian, and he takes the name Caesar Augustus.
Okay.
And so that is effectively when we flip from the Roman Republic, overwhelmingly governed by a Senate and laws, to a Roman Empire, which is effectively a dictatorship that sinks or swims based on the quality of its leader.
Got it.
Okay, so Tiberius is the second emperor of Rome. So this is all kind of a new experiment for Rome. How do we transition power? Who succeeds who? Right now, we're all a part of this dynasty called the Julio-Claudian Dynasty. And these people are going to rule for about 100 years, and Tiberius is the second in this line. So we're thinking we're going to go with primogeniture. I mean, whoever is first born to Tiberius gets to be emperor when it's over. But Tiberius has this advisor named Aelius Sejanus. Sejanus, you'll hear it both ways. And this Sejanus guy is very, very clever in terms of political maneuvering, and he is easily the second most powerful person in Rome, maybe for a while the most powerful person.
Spell his name, Sejanus?
S-E-J-A-N-U-S, Sejanus.
Okay, so we've got an emperor who is trying to hold together the power in Rome. We've got a super-duper advisor here, Sejanus, and go.
So what happens is Sejanus gradually takes control of the day-to-day operations of the empire, and Tiberius, who is kind of over it anyway, pseudo-retires to the island of Capri off the coast of Naples. And do you have Isle of Capri casinos where you live?
We don't.
Okay, that's a thing here. It's the reason that the Isle of Capri is this idealized, lavish place that you would name a casino after is because of all of the rumors of licentiousness regarding Tiberius's semi-retirement. It was like a hot tub video. It was just constant porn for Tiberius while he was on this island, indulging in everything. That's the perception, at least.
Okay.
Sejanus is all business. And we know that Tiberius's pseudo-retirement happened before Pontius Pilate was appointed governor of Judea.
How can an emperor retire?
Well, how can an emperor do anything? We don't really know what emperors do yet because it's a new empire. Do they have to be there to run things? Can they take an early retirement? I don't know. You can do whatever you want. You're an emperor, right? I mean, he's feeling it out. We don't know how this works yet. And he's got a guy who he trusts to handle business. So timeline-wise, we can say pretty surely Sejanus appointed Pontius Pilate. Now, there are all these rumors later in history.
Hold on, wait. So
yeah,
I need to draw a line here. So you're speaking as fact, but you said we can say pretty surely, so pretty clearly. So is this something that you figured out, or is this something that's documented?
No, lots of other people agree with me who study this stuff. It's really a question of timeline. I mean, it's possible that Tiberius knew who Pilate was and really liked him, and in the middle of being fed grapes and being fanned and having other things done to him as well, that he's like, who I want to be governor of Judea is Pilate. But he wasn't really giving any other orders at the time, so it seems really weird that he just would have given that one order. It's far more likely that his bureaucracy handled that, and Sejanus was at the head of that bureaucracy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit speculative, but it's overwhelmingly likely it wasn't Tiberius who made this call.
I guess this is why I'm saying this. In like the hard sciences, if I say the acceleration due to gravity is 9.81 meters per second square.
Sure.
If I say that, then that is a fact, as best we can tell. Or if I say like protons and electrons repel each other. Whatever I say, it's based on fact. But you're sitting here talking about history, and it's different because you're going on some things were written down over here, but how do we know what was written down was true? You know, a lot of people say that that's the reason they don't agree with Christianity in general is because it was written down and they don't believe the integrity of the documents, all these types of things. So I guess when you're telling me this stuff, will you just make it clear for me? Yes, we know this because of this, or we don't know this because of that. Will you just tell me these things?
Yeah, sure, but how do we know anything?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know.
I mean, unless it's repeatable, we don't know it, but we do know it. I mean, it all comes down to the threshold of belief. Was Pontius Pilate a person? Well, I mean, we got coins that say he was. We got a rock with his name on it that says he was.
Tell everybody about the coin.
All kinds of documentation. Sure. Yeah, I just went and bought a coin because I became curious about these physical proofs of who Pilate was and when he was in charge. So I just went and Googled it, and I was like, oh, I can afford that. And I just literally bought a coin minted probably during the first 3 years of Pilate's reign, maybe as much as in the later 5 or 6 years of his reign.
How much was it?
It's less than $200. Yeah, it comes in this neat little tidy packaging, and there's a whole organization that rates the quality of these coins and that vouches for their validity. I mean, it's not a coin that's really worth enough to make it profitable to fake it anyway.
What's it made out of?
But, I don't know. It's either a copper or a bronze, but I guess I don't know.
So what is on the coin?
The way it's, the little patina on it would tell me that it's a copper.
Okay.
There's a stave on one side, like a shepherd's staff kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the backside is harder to make out. I guess I'm looking at it here. I can't really say exactly what I'm looking at. It's hard to tell what this is, like maybe stalks of wheat.
You have it right now?
Or something.
You have it in your hand?
Yeah.
So I remember when you got this coin for the third chair. I'll let you know. So Matt's doing all this research about Pontius Pilate, and then he tells me, like, dude, I bought a coin. I was like, oh, that's great, Matt. You bought a coin. That's neat. What is on the coin? And you're like, well, it was minted by Pontius Pilate. And I'm kind of surprised to hear you downplay it right now that mics are on, because this was like a big deal to you. Like this wasn't like, oh, I bought a coin. This was
I'm kind of ramping up.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, if you like the coin, tell people about the coin, dude, because this was like a borderline religious experience for you.
Borderline. I think it was more of a historical experience connected to religious stuff. But yeah, when I got the coin, I was excited about it because it's history and I like history. But it occurred to me at some point, this is the only physical artifact from this era that I have spent my life studying harder than any other era I've looked at that I've actually held in my hand. This is it. I've actually touched it. And not only that, I actually own it. That is my coin. And Pontius Pilate, who is listed in the Apostles' Creed, he made this coin. He struck this. Dang. And then I got to thinking further, and I've told you this as well, just about, well, I don't know what the odds are, but I'd say they're pretty good that somebody I've heard of from that era of history had this jingling around in their pocket at some point. And who knows, maybe somebody really famous that I've heard of from that era had this jingling around in their pocket. It's not about whether or not that happened. It's about holding something where there's even a possibility that, like, I don't know, say Jesus of Nazareth had this, or that it was on a table that Jesus of Nazareth flipped over and went scattering and clinking across the floor of the temple courtyard. There's just all these stories that involve coinage, and you're actually holding one that could be one of those coins. It's just, yeah, it's a pretty neat connection. And for you, if you go and do a video about the energy transfer down a whip as it is cracked and how that all breaks down, you can just get the whip back and do it again because your discipline is repeatable. My discipline is not repeatable. And so you always have hands-on access, or almost always, to the things that are enriching your life and that you're thinking about and trying to really understand and then explain to other people. I don't. I deal with memory. I deal with what was written down. I deal with probability. And a lot of the stuff that I study is so far removed from now that the idea of ever touching any of it is just, I mean, you just don't even think of it. It's not even an option. And then it occurred to me, for a couple $100, I could touch some of it. I could actually hold it. So in that respect, this is a place where our disciplines overlap. I am actually tangibly, physically interacting with hard data from the era in question that I study, as you physically interact with hard data from the stuff that you study. So yeah, this is pretty exciting to me.
That's cool, dude. That's really cool. It's 2,000 years old.
Isn't that nuts?
I wonder where that coin was. Like, how did it make the journey? Okay, got it. Jesus may have gone down to the local wood store and bought some, like, lumber with it to make a desk or something. I got it. But what happened to that coin in the meantime? Like, there's been 1,500 years or however many thousands of years in between there and here. What happened to it?
Almost 2,000 years. We're closing in. I can give you some hints. What I know is this. When you look at a timeline that has neat little colored bars for like Rome, the Middle Ages, the Modern Age, that is an approximation. It is way blurrier than those timelines make it look. The reality is that Rome never really fell. It just adapted and evolved and became other things. It moved east. It's still the Roman Empire, but now it's in Constantinople and we call it the Byzantine Empire. And gradually the West gets absorbed into the church and local Italian kingdoms and stuff like that. Well, eventually some of those kingdoms congeal enough to have a guy feel justified in calling himself an emperor. And Charlemagne, he's crowned emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by, I think, Leo III on Christmas Day, 800 AD. And Charlemagne now is an emperor over a Holy Roman Empire. So it's still, kind of Rome. Geographically, it's not the same. But Rome casts this long shadow over the Middle Ages. And Rome represents order and value and predictability. But the Middle Ages in Europe represents chaos and scatteredness. And instead of this big imperial idea, you've got this little local ideal. So who prints coins in the Middle Ages? Well, some kings were powerful enough to do that. But one of the major currencies that held value all the way through the Middle Ages is simply Roman currency. In fact, I believe I've heard it said that Roman currency carried value and was still exchanged up into the Napoleonic era in the early 19th century in Europe. That's my understanding.
That coin minted by, the people under Pilate, that was just for Puerto Rico of Rome. That was over there in the corner, right? That's not like, it doesn't have Tiberius's face on it.
No, he wouldn't have wanted to do that. He made some mistakes in putting Tiberius's face on things, and it bit him in the butt.
Pilate made mistakes.
Yeah, he did. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But no, presumably coins from the later empire are the ones that you still saw in circulation all the way to Napoleon. But historically, I think it's really well demonstrated that Rome was sort of this ideal of order and yesteryear and sanity that everyone was constantly trying to point back to or cling to. Why do you have czars in Russia? Czar is Caesar. They're trying to claim ownership to the legacy of Rome.
The Third
in
Reich.
The 20th century. You see right where I was going. The Germans tried to claim connectedness with Rome. Why did the Nazis have an eagle in that posture as their sigil?
Speaking of which, I was in a meeting in Germany one time, and we were looking up an old standard, an old test standard.
Yeah.
And the German went to the back room and got it, and he came out and he said, "Oh, I found it. It's pretty old. Like, it's old enough to have an eagle on it."
Oh.
He was joking, but he was joking, and he laughed, and we looked around the room. We're like, are we allowed to laugh at that? Yeah, okay, that's funny. We can laugh.
Okay, I'm glad we're there.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And another thing I used to do, speaking of money and currency, people that would come visit Alabama and they'd come to the range for some of the testing that we did, they would say something like, "Well, what do we need to do when we head over there?" Like they were getting their travel packet together. I was like, "Oh, it's just like anywhere else, except if you have any Confederate bills, go ahead and bring those. They still work in the vending machines." And dude, you could learn pretty quickly where people thought you were. Like they would say, if they said, "Oh, you're funny," or they're like, "Oh yeah, I got a stack, I'll bring them." You're like, okay, they're with it. They know that we're like humans. But if they said something like, "Really? Like how does that work?" Like and they said it seriously, you're like, okay, cool. These people have very strong stereotypes, and they think we're all inbred. So,
is one of their stereotypes that they think vending machines were invented in the 1860s? I mean,
I'm just telling you, that joke fell flat sometimes, and when it did, I knew what kind of person I was dealing with. So, yeah, man, just bring your Confederate bills. I'll work in the vending machines. That's funny. Anyway, okay, getting back. You made me think one more thing. I'm sorry. I'm going to do one more rabbit trail.
Okay, now before you do that rabbit trail, can I tell you about the equivalent for that here?
Yeah.
Here, we literally still kind of have the cowboys and Indians thing. And we live right next to the Wind River Indian Reservation. The people who live there are citizens of our community, and people who live in town do business and interact with folks on the reservation. I mean, it really is this vestige of the Old West, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some folks are still pretty upset about how all of that played out. Some folks are in a place where, well, you know, we all share a community. Let's be a community. And I was in McDonald's maybe a year after I moved here. So I'm really not used to this social dynamic yet. Don't really know how to play it. And there's a group of 4 Native American teenagers sitting back in the play area. Our kids are playing and goofing around, and Camilla and I are sitting there eating some food. And there's a guy who comes in, no kids, but he sits down, and he starts giving the Native American kids kind of a hard time. It wasn't really a racist hard time. It was more like old guy toward teenagers hard time.
Yeah.
But it was sort of weird and kind of insensitive, and we felt uncomfortable and weren't quite sure what to do with it. And these kids were awesome. They rolled with it. They didn't get all indignant. They kind of jabbed back at the guy, sort of wore him down, and he was a little softer by the time he got up and left. But it was awkward. I mean, really uncomfortable. And as soon as the guy left, I congratulated the kids. Like, hey, you guys handled that really well. As much respect. And the one looks at me, he's like, "It's fine. We're going to burn his wagon later." I was like, you are awesome.
That is amazing.
I got out of my chair and high-fived all 4 kids.
That is amazing. That is the appropriate, the appropriate amount of embracing stereotypes and being able to joke about them. That's great.
I loved it, and we'll see if Tina does as to whether or not that makes it into the edit.
That's hilarious.
You were asking me something about Rome, though. What were we talking about?
It doesn't matter. What I was going to say is, okay. as people think these currencies are strong and they're going to live forever, it made me think about, a day when you would have a Bitcoin being compared in terms of value of Roman, whatever it would be, a drachma or whatever. I don't know. What is a Roman currency? I don't know.
Sure, that sounds good. It's whatever. Denarius is what you usually hear.
Okay, cool. Anyway, long story short, you got a coin and you love it, and it makes you think about history, and it makes you connect, and it makes you a little squishy. It just does. More squishy than you're letting on right now. So,
you know what? Can we just admit that things make me squishy?
Yeah, things make me squishy too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it, but
what can you do?
That coin made you do you carry it in your pocket?
Yeah, you know what? I do, and not for religious reasons. I just kind of like it. And I like showing it to people. It's a cool conversation piece, and yeah, so the whole time I was working on that video, I carried it around in my pocket. And when we did Palm Sunday, and I talked about Pontius Pilate in church, and it was a nice full room and everything, I sent it around the whole church. I started in the front like show and tell in kindergarten. It's like, here, take this and pass it along. Tell. Well, how can you not?
Yeah, I know.
That and nap time.
Do you remember a particular show and tell moment that you did? Kindergarten?
Not that I did, but I remember one that somebody else did. They brought in a skull of some animal.
What?
And I'd never been exposed to that. Yeah, I don't know. It was like a, what do they call the kind of taxidermy mount that isn't made to look lifelike? It's just the skull. What do they call that?
European.
Okay, cool. They brought in one of those. Yeah. I'll tell you who would be able to tell us more about that. Emily would have answered that question confidently and with details.
She would, yes.
So, yeah, it was just something like that. It was a European mount, and I'd never seen a dead thing's skull before, so that kind of weirded me out, but I remember it distinctly. You?
I just remember I had one, I don't know if I had Transformers. I had one Transformer dinosaur, but I had GoBots.
Grimlock? Slag?
No, I didn't have.
Swoop?
I don't remember what I had.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the names. I just know how to transform them. That's all I knew. But yeah, I remember taking a transformer one day. That was cool. This is fun and all, but if we're going to get to all the Pilates or Pilates in this episode, we're going to have to get back to Pilate. So let's go. Go back.
Okay.
Go
All right. Yep.
Okay. So Pilate.
Mm-hmm.
What about him?
What do you need to know? Is that just carte blanche? Does that just mean go?
Yeah, go. And
okay,
don't
my
go,
pleasure.
Don't go like super detailed. Just give me the overarching.
Yeah, you just let's do this. If I'm getting to a place where you think the detail is too great, I just want you to make a high-pitched screeching sound.
Okay.
And I'll know that means maybe it's time to move on.
Okay, cool.
Please don't make that sound.
Okay, I won't.
Here's what happened. There are later accounts that suggest that Sejanus was not a real big fan of the Jewish people, and that Sejanus may have had some kind of agenda to be an aggressor or to provoke the Jewish people. Now, not everybody thinks this. This is one of those historical debates where people read the data a little differently. But Philo of Alexandria suggests that there was a decidedly anti-Semitic intent on the part of Sejanus and Pilate. So it may be that that's why Pilate got appointed, was that he would be sympathetic to that go jab the Jewish people thing. Maybe Pilate was a great guy. We don't know. That's part of the fun of all of this, is that we have a lot of details about Pilate, but we don't really know his motivations or what happened to him. So whatever the case, I think Pilate was really connected to Sejanus, and his power came from that connection. He's the guy, on whose coattails he rode. Well, Sejanus pushes his luck back in Rome, and he is trying to consolidate power, I think with the intent of becoming the next emperor. And so he works out a plan, a kill list, like Arya has, to figure out who needs to go in order for him to be the logical choice to follow Tiberius when he inevitably drinks and grapes himself to death on the Isle of Capri. So in the meantime, Pilate is over there in Judea. And remember I said that the thing about him not putting Tiberius's face on coins, because that might not be a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I mentioned that. So he makes a rookie mistake right off the bat, and you can picture like a Roman standard or a banner that somebody would carry into battle.
Like a flag. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of stuff do you picture being on one of those?
Like lions and unicorns and...
Yeah, okay, unicorns?
Yeah, unicorns.
I could maybe see that. Okay, yeah, I could see in the Middle Ages some kind of unicorn standard.
Queen Elizabeth's standard or her crest or whatever has a unicorn on one side and a lion on the other.
Dang, I didn't know about the unicorn. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, or if you're in Australia, like an emu and a kangaroo.
That's less intimidating.
Yeah, Australia is the only one that on their their national seal, they have two animals that they eat.
Yeah, and on top of that, Australia has more animals that can murder a human than anywhere else, and they go with those?
Yeah, I know.
I don't get it.
Anyway, so on the standard
Bless their hearts.
Pilate, yeah.
Right. So on these standards, they have a depiction of Tiberius. And so Pilate, who governs up north in Caesarea Maritima, which is on the coast, master plan community, really fancy, cool town, he is kind of put some distance between him and Jerusalem. It's been weird in Jerusalem. The Jewish people don't want to be governed by the Romans. They want to stay independent. They miss their independence. And a lot of people there are thinking we should overthrow Rome as soon as we have the opportunities. This is it's a tough place to govern. Right off the bat, Pilate sends some troops down, and they've got banners that have a picture of Tiberius on them. And then they put those banners in relatively close proximity to the temple, and the Jewish people are like, no, that's idolatry. That's a graven image of an emperor who claims to be a deity, which the emperors did. And so they all go up the road 75 miles to Capernaum and set up shop in the Hippodrome. You know what a Hippodrome is?
No.
Ah, that's fun. It's a horse track. It's like in Ben-Hur where they ran the horses around. It's a circus, is a Hippodrome.
Really?
And yep. That's how it works. I think hippopotamus gets its name for being mistaken for a horse by people who had roots in the Greek language.
Oh, that's
the
fun.
Other way around.
So this is like the big sport of the day.
Yeah. Except they're not running horses there because you got a whole bunch of protesters screwing up the horse races standing in the middle of the track. And so Pilate sends soldiers out to the track. He's like, we're just going to have to kill some people to send a message about how strong a leader I am. And the Jewish people who came up to protest are like, fine, kill us. And according to Josephus, the Jewish historian from the first century, they all bared their necks and were like, just cut our throats. Better to have you do this than to have a graven image near the temple. And Pilate blinks. He's like, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't kill him then. And so he doesn't. And he takes the banners away, and nobody gets executed. So it's a pretty clumsy start to your time in office.
And these are the people he's supposed to be ruling. Like, he's supposed to, like, get it. And the first thing he does just infuriates them. And then they're like, you know what? Just kill us. They go nuclear option right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a
and
doofus.
I think smartly, he errs on the side of don't kill people if you're not really sure.
Yeah, but he still looks like a doofus. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he looks like a complete goober. He looks indecisive. I mean, his garrison is going to respect him less after he came that close to pulling the trigger and then didn't. Now all of the protesters know we can just yell loudly and get what we want. In that case, I think it's fine for them to say we don't want your Roman stuff on our holy stuff. But, whatever. Nobody needs to get killed here. Well, Pilate, realizing that he kind of crapped in his helmet, is like, okay, we got to try a little harder here. And so he decides that he's going to make it up to them by completing this long dormant aqueduct project and finishing the last few miles to run it into Jerusalem, which is a really nice public works project. I mean, that will really help Jerusalem. But to fund
water's
it,
nice, yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, who doesn't like that? To fund it, he goes and takes this valuable treasure from the temple treasury, cashes it out, and uses it to pay for the aqueduct. And you can guess how that went over.
So he just doesn't get it. Like, he's supposed to be over these people, but he doesn't know anything about what they like or what they care about or what they do or what's, like, off limits. He just doesn't get it.
That, to me, is how his entire reign, every incident we know about him, looks like he's trying to justify how big and strong a man he is. I totally didn't get this job just because somebody powerful likes me. I deserve it. I'm good at things. It looks like there's that insecurity and not understanding who the Jewish people are. It just looks like they picked the wrong person to govern. That's my opinion. Other people think he was good at it. I don't see the evidence for that. So this leads to another confrontation and showdown. This one comes with a few beatings. I think some people actually get beat to death during the protests regarding the aqueduct. Then there's some reference that's very subtle in the Gospels about Pilate having mingled the blood of the Galileans with their sacrifices. So apparently he killed some worshipers at the temple. I don't know what that means, but it's there. And then you got the Jesus thing. But in order to understand the Jesus thing, you got to understand what's going on back in Rome with the guy who effectively is why Pilate has a job. Sejanus plays his hands too far. He poisons or has poisoned the heir to the throne, which is a guy named Drusus. He dies, and somebody tips off Tiberius that this was foul play, and it was your right-hand man. And Tiberius... Oh, I wish we could talk Game of Thrones right here, because there's this amazing example as to how this situation played out from Game of Thrones, but I can't. It would ruin everything. What happens is that Tiberius has Sejanus come into the Senate to hear some lengthy oration or whatever, and it's kind of rambling and weird. And then at the end, it just flips the whole thing right on Sejanus, and it's like, you're a criminal, a bad guy, arrest him. And Sejanus gets arrested, and then Tiberius carries out this massive purge against everybody related to Sejanus or who was appointed by or likes Sejanus. So if you're Pontius Pilate, I mean, you see what I'm getting at here, right?
Yep.
This is dangerous territory.
So basically the guy that appointed Pontius Pilate just got whacked.
Yep.
And now Pilate's like, uh-oh, here I am in Puerto Rico. The guy that got me this job just got offed. It's only a matter of time before I get offed.
Right. So what do? I mean, I think you start kissing up to the person who could off you.
At what point in time did this happen relative to the Bible story?
Okay, this gets tricky because...
It's a simple question.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Dang.
There are 3 credible possible dates for the execution of Jesus. Let me save us a bunch of time and say I think the most credible by far is 30 AD, in which case it lines up almost exactly concurrent with the arrest of alias Sejanus. So Sejanus has been arrested, and the purge is occurring as Jesus comes into Jerusalem and as this is presented to Pilate. So if you go back and you read the Gospels and imagine Pilate as being totally distracted, thinking about how to save his wife and his kids and himself from getting executed by Tiberius in this purge. And now, wait, what are we doing here? Who is this guy? Honestly, guys, I don't care. He seems innocent to me. Maybe we should not kill him. This guy's definitely guilty over here. Let's just kill him instead. I don't understand why you all are so worked up about this fellow, but okay, fine, I'll talk to him. That is the impression I get of where Pilate's at.
And he actually talked to Jesus, right? At least in the Gospels, there's this account of Pilate and Jesus talking.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of unreliable accounts way after the fact outside of the Bible that I guess corroborate it, but you can't, they're just not credible. I think the Gospel accounts are credible. Do you remember any of that conversation? Like any of the high points?
Basically, if I recall correctly, Pilate's like, you do realize I have the ability to kill you, right? And
yeah,
Jesus is all
Jesus
like,
said?
well, all the authority you have was given to you by by God.
By God, yes.
Yeah, and he's like, okay, whatever. You're clearly crazy. But then Pilate's wife has a dream, and she's like, you shouldn't kill him.
Right. Yeah, have nothing to do with this man is the conclusion she comes to. This is dangerous stuff. Can you hear me turning Bible pages in the background?
I cannot. Can you hear the lawnmower in the background here?
No, but that's good. It makes it feel ambient and like we're having a real conversation.
Right.
Yeah, so Jesus gets bounced back and forth between Pilate and Herod. Herod is one of a larger group of Herods that are this family that governed Judea and Galilee and around Israel during this time. They were the ethnarchs, or the client kings, if you will. So it's kind of a convoluted process to understand as an outsider as to how the justice worked here. But Pilate is the guy who has the ability to set Jesus free or condemn him. And ultimately, it looks like there's going to be another giant riot. People are getting mad and wanting to break stuff and yelling and demanding Jesus' execution, but they can't execute him. Only Pilate can. And so Pilate has some musings about epistemology and what is real. Remember, he has that line, what is truth? And he sounds like a guy who's beat down by all of the political relativism and nothing is real. And finally, realizing that nobody is going to accept anything here other than Jesus' execution, he's like, fine. And then you reference the washing the hands thing. And there's no two ways about how to read that. He's saying, his blood be on your hands. I don't want anything to do with this. But yeah, sure, okay, we'll go ahead and execute him. And then, of course, Jesus does get executed. People who do not believe in Jesus would say, and then he was executed, and that's the end of that. A whole lot of people throughout history would say, oh, Jesus came back to life after that. And what you think about that kind of defines where you land on the whole Christian, not Christian thing, and that's a conversation for another time. But whatever the case, Pilate to me seems like a guy who was preoccupied with something going on a million miles away, or well, a couple thousand miles away. So the Jesus thing comes and goes. Christianity starts to really catch on after that, but Pilate seems to still be more worried about his dealings with the Jewish people. And there's a couple more incidents. You don't need to know all the details. He has a showdown over some gilded shields that he puts up to honor Tiberius. I think he's trying to kiss up to Tiberius, like, don't murder me. Look, I made these artistic shields to honor you. But it has an inscription on the shield about Tiberius Caesar, son of God. And he just had a big to-do over a son of God incident with Jesus. There's another big riot. People get upset. Then a group of like cousins of the Jewish people. You remember hearing about the Samaritans? Well, you've heard of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
These people are enemies of the Jews who live in kind of north-ish central modern-day Israel. They worship on a different mountain, and Pilate didn't really understand them at all. They have some prophet rise up who wants to go dig up some secret buried treasures on a mountain. He sends soldiers. They have a big fight, and these armed worshipers end up getting killed. And then the Samaritan leaders say, we're done dealing with Pilate. And they go to the governor of Syria up north, a guy named Vitellius. And Vitellius somehow, I guess, has the authority to depose Pilate. And he sends down a legate, a guy named, what was that dude's name? Marcellus. And Pilate goes home, packs up, and he leaves in 36 AD. He theoretically is going back to Rome to answer to Tiberius for how bad things went. except Tiberius dies while Pilate is en route, which means that the next emperor after Tiberius, do you happen to remember this guy's name?
Nero.
Nero's a little bit later. This
starts with a C. Don't tell me Caligula.
Yes. Nice job.
Look at me and my Roman
Very
stuff.
nice job.
Yep.
That's excellent, man. Caligula was an awful man who did crazy, interesting, creative, awful things. He is the emperor who I believe is famed to have invited all of the Senate and their wives in for a great big banquet, but it was actually an auction to sell the senators' wives for certain illicit activities.
I tell you what, man, that wouldn't fly in Alabama.
well, I would hope not. And the people of Alabama are armed.
Yes.
There was sword control in Rome. So this kid, who knows where his head is at? My guess would be, I don't know, Sejanus is how I got appointed. A friend of Sejanus is at worst not an enemy of mine. It doesn't do me any good to promote someone who is of questionable character like Pilate. It doesn't do me any good to punish somebody like Pilate. It does me the most good to get rid of somebody like Pilate. So my guess is that Pilate, if he ever even met with Caligula, was just given a pension and a retirement somewhere far from Rome. We don't hear anything else about him having any further political career. The trail just goes cold, and that's it.
So
that's where the fun starts.
Very quickly, where did all these sources come from? Like you said, oh, he retired. So I'm assuming there's like 4 books. I'm assuming one of them's Josephus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Josephus is the guy that wrote the account of the history of the Jews, right?
Yeah, his 2 most famous works are the Antiquities and the Jewish Wars. Josephus is a Jewish guy who hopped sides when he realized his team was going to lose, and then he became a historian as well as participating in the fight around 70 AD that ended in the destruction of the temple. Destin, Sandlin, and I have 2 questions for you.
Yes, shoot.
Are you grateful to the patrons of this program?
I am grateful to the patrons of this program.
Question number 2. To what would you liken your gratitude toward the patrons of this program?
You know how when you're mowing a yard in the hottest part of the summer,
mm-hmm.
it is kind of dusty, and all that dust gets stirred up all over the air. And
yeah, I can picture it.
Those little boogers that you get that are the real crusty, like everything's dry.
Oh, I know the kind.
And you're parched.
Yeah.
And it's like you're drained physically,
mm-hmm.
beaten by the sun.
Sure.
And then you walk out, off the lawnmower, and you walk inside, and you pour yourself a large glass of water, like a really cold water with ice in it and stuff like that. You take that first big swig.
I can picture it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like whenever I see new patron.
Oh, it's like that.
It's the feeling, yeah. What about you? When you see like a new patron to No Dumb Questions, or perhaps even like a patron that's been around for a while, and you can tell that they're supporting just because they like what we do, and they've been doing it for a year and a half or whatever. What does that feel like to you?
What it feels like to me is like I've just been accosted by a group of middle school bullies in an alley, and they've beaten me and chastised me for my dumb face and bad haircut and my goofy shirt that my mom made for me because she loves me and we can't afford new shirts right now. And there I am laying, wondering, who I am and what I'm doing here and if I'll ever have a friend again. And then I look up into the glaring sun as a shadow steps between it and myself, and I can barely make out the visage of some kind-hearted person. And I think, am I going to get beaten again? And maybe I recoil for a brief moment anticipating that, but then a warm, friendly hand reaches out, pulls me out of the dust, cleans me up, and says, "It's going to be okay, buddy." That's what getting a new patron is like to me.
Like, did they rip your clothes off when they beat you in the alley, or did they?
Well, no, I'm still clothed. No, the patrons don't see me naked.
The shirt that your mom made, did they rip it?
No, but she did make me some shorts once, and I tried to jump over a fence to get a ball.
I heard about this.
It impaled my shorts, and I got hung by my shorts. And then my parents had to come out and lift me
up. They were on your ankles and you're hanging upside down?
No, it went up my short leg and out the top of my shorts, and I was suspended, and there's nothing I could do to reach around behind me so I'm just hung, leaning forward by the shorts on a fence post, and my parents had to come and lift me off of the fence post.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was a great, dignified moment for me. I was in 5th grade.
So what you're saying is you really appreciate people that support this program on Patreon.
That's really what I was trying to say. That was what I was trying to say. The nudity part was confusing for me when you responded. But other than that, I think everything we meant to communicate came through.
I think I understand.
Cool. It's patreon.com/notumquestions if anybody else feels like doing it.
So the sources that you used for this work were Josephus and what else?
Okay, primary sources would be Josephus, Philo of Alexandria, philosopher who lived from, I really should know this by now, maybe like 20 BC to 30 AD, 50 AD maybe? I don't know, something like that. He wrote a letter to Caligula that covers some details about Pilate's life. Additionally, you've got a couple of later church historians who are, on the one hand, you might be tempted to write that off, like, oh, well, a couple hundred years after the fact, that's no good. But Eusebius, this church historian, is quoting sources that we no longer have in our possession, but that he obviously did have in his possession. Additionally, you've got all four Gospels, where parts of this story come up. Some people are tempted to say, if it's in the Bible, it doesn't count. Not a source, irrelevant. Even if you don't think there's any God behind it, I think that's a perilous decision. The Gospels are not, they're not a religious hammer that are written as in a way that they're designed to manipulate. They still operate within the boundaries of history. I mean, you go and look at Luke, he had a historical procedure to what he wrote. His work was vettable and checkable. People might have arrived at different conclusions about the nature of God or the miraculous, but all the people are where the people were supposed to be. All the dates line up with what the dates should be. It looks like Luke is writing within a moment in history pretty dang accurately. So it seems like these larger political details, chronological details, Luke has got right. And so I think the Gospels do count as a reliable primary source, especially because Pilate doesn't really play a religious, spiritual role in the accounts. It's not like everything about whether Jesus is God or not hinges on what Pilate thought. I don't know, whatever as to what Pilate thought. He's a secular character who shows up in a historical and religious story and just does secular character things. Lying about Pilate and who he was, there's no advantage to this. And it lines up with the characterizations we get from non-Christian sources. So I think it's a valid primary source. Additionally, in terms of just corroborating his existence, we've got what's called the Pilate Stone, which is a straight up rock that was found in the theater in Caesarea Maritima, where his governor's palace was. And it straight up says his name. It's a dedication stone for, I don't know, a building or a theater or something called the Tiberium. And so it says his name, his title, and that he built something called the Tiberium, obviously named for Tiberius. So that's pretty good. And then just a few months ago, they found a ring in an old fortress that dates to the time of Pilate that has the name Pilate on the ring. So it was probably one of those signet rings that you stamp into wax or something.
To like sign letters and stuff or seal things?
Yeah, I think that's a good guess. The Greek on the ring, which you can still make out, is better rendered like for Pilate than just Pilate. So this was probably something that you would stamp to say this shipment goes to Pilate or is on behalf of Pilate, something like that. Whatever the case, it verifies his name.
Okay, cool. Let me pull you out of the woods. You're way in the woods.
Yeah. Well, this is how it works.
Yeah,
that's good. I need you.
That was a fire hose for quite a while there. So
you asked a question, you got an answer.
Well, the question was, what were your sources? And the answers were, man, check this out. Let's go on this wonderful mystery tour.
I didn't sound like that at all. First of all, that was not my tone.
It's amazing. Look, there's all these things, and here's a ring.
I
fantastic.
Sounded super masculine that entire time.
All right, so got it. Those were your sources. So what is the takeaway? Like, why did you do this? What did you learn? What's the takeaway?
Okay, for me, the takeaway is twofold. One, it's really fun to dig deep into the known history. That is kind of the inner ring of the dartboard. Make sense? And then as you move out from that little tiny red inner ring, you got those secondary inner rings or inner ring. And that is where you get into what people made of Pilate around the time that he was there. So Josephus gives us details, but he also gives us personal commentary and opinions. To me, the details are red inner ring. This is pretty much fact as best as we can establish it. His commentary isn't useless because those opinions, they tell us what people thought about him at the time.
Hey, stop for just a second. Stop. You're seriously in the woods, so let's time out for just a second.
No, I'm answering the question. This is deeply important. This is the answer to your question. This is how history works. So I care about how science works.
But you're flipping back and
No, hear me out.
You're flipping back and forth between Josephus and Pilate.
Yeah.
You're using personal pronouns, and it's hard to keep straight.
Hear me out on this. Josephus tells us facts about Pilate, and he also offers his own personal biases and commentary about Pilate. Both are important because the facts give us actual details, but the commentary also tells us a truth about what people at that time thought about Pilate. So in the same way that it is really useful to know what Gerald Ford did while he was president, it is also under the purview of history to know what people thought about how Gerald Ford did as president. Both of those things are history. One is the history of people's opinions about something. One is the history of the raw facts that actually happened in that case. The story of what people thought about Pilate is fascinating.
So you can do two things here. So you can kind of get the overarching, this was the history, this is the thing that happened, and then, here we put a microphone on the person on the street so that we can understand the general tone and tenor of the conversation around this person.
Yes, and so to answer your question, why does it matter and why did I get into it? It's important because Pilate, in my video, I used the expression, he's a Rorschach test. He's an ink blot that you look at and you project whatever you're feeling into that ambiguous ink blot image. I see a bat with horns. Oh, I see a bowling alley and someone celebrating. I don't know. Where's your head at? That's what you see. Well, Pilate is just like that. If people have a decidedly anti-Semitic bias, then they are going to paint in their fan fiction or their opinions about Pontius Pilate, they're going to paint him as this horrified bystander while the evil Jews murdered Jesus. If somebody really doesn't like the Romans, maybe they don't like the way later Roman Christians were trying to take over Christianity and they liked an Eastern version of Christianity. Well, Pilate worked for the Romans. Make Pilate look awful because it makes Rome look awful. And then the church descended out of that Roman government, scores some negative points, and your church that isn't part of Rome maybe scores some positive points. So what happens is there is this mountain of Pontius Pilate fan fiction that emerges starting in the 2nd century and then takes off in about the 4th century and runs all the way up into like the colonial age in America. People are still writing Pontius Pilate fan fiction. In fact, I think people were still writing Pontius Pilate fan fiction in the 19th century, and some gullible people on the internet still try to hold that out as being like, look, Pilate said these things. No, he didn't. Look at the language. It was written 100 years ago. It's a fraud.
When was the Apostles' Creed written?
I think it is a 4th century product, if I recall correctly.
So you're saying people started writing about Pontius Pilate around the 4th century, so it would make sense for him to be included in the Apostles' Creed at that time.
Yeah, because he was very, very popular. Here's the thing. You know how today the one thing that right and left can agree on is that those 9 people in robes in our country are the deciders of truth?
Yeah.
Everybody wants the Supreme Court to say, your team was right about abortion all along, or no, your team was right about abortion all along. And in a way, it's almost like truth is so unknowable that only the government can tell us what the truth is through the power of the Supreme Court and interpreting the laws. Now, of course, everybody would push back on that, but that's how we function sometimes. Likewise here, Rome is truth. What the government said about a thing, the legality or not legality of Jesus' execution, that is very important. Now, looking back on it, we don't care about Roman government. Who cares what they thought? Governments come and go, but it matters in the moment, and your government now matters to you in the moment. And so people had a stake in what Pilate thought. Was this a rightful condemnation? Was Jesus tried properly, and was he rightly found guilty? Or was this trial a sham, and it was all wrong? Or did Pilate carry out this trial and get the verdict wrong, and then he changed his mind later after Jesus was dead, and he realized he was wrong, in which case that would kind of nullify his official investigation? People put stock in Pilate's opinion, and many people were very vested in the idea that Rome actually liked Jesus and viewed him as innocent. and the literature reflects that.
Got it. And so people kind of use Pilate to think whatever they want to think.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know how telephone and legends work? Every legend tries to outdo the last version of the legend. Like, there's no official story of what happened with Thor and Odin. Greek mythology is a chaotic mess, and you kind of try to put together all the stories to come up with something cohesive. But, I mean, this is an open canon when you're talking about mythology, right? Anybody can take these characters and have them do anything, and some stick and some don't. The same thing happens here with Pilate. Do you have any like crazy northern Alabama local legends?
Yeah, dude. There's one there's two actually. One of them is White Thing, but you say it White
Thing.
Thang, White Thing. And so White Thing is this creature, at least this was when we were growing up. It's this creature that lives out in, for some reason, fields, and it will come up at night, and it has the hair of a woman, and it's white.
Ooh.
And I don't know. I just know my buddy Scott's dad shot at it with a 30-06, and when it hit it, it screamed.
That's definitely true.
It screams like a woman. You know, there's all kinds of stuff like that. And then what are you doing? No, there's another one called Crybaby Hollow.
What?
Which is not how you say it. I'm kind of sanitizing that for you, but it's Crybaby Holler.
Okay.
So Crybaby Holler, growing up, was this place down it's in this little valley, and it's a back road, and if you can't get to where you're going, then you'd have to go through Crybaby Holler, which is like a gravel road with like a little bridge. And legend has it that some baby was killed there, or a mama threw a baby off the bridge, or there's something, I don't know. But anyway, baby died there. That's all that you need to know. And then if you were to go to Crybaby Holler at night, and you lay a Baby Ruth candy bar on the bridge, you're gonna hear a baby crying, and that's the ghost of the baby. And so, like, everybody's super, it's like something that sixth graders get really excited about. No, it's amazing. It's amazing when you're in sixth grade.
That is when these things have currency.
Yeah. Oh man, if you hear that the eighth graders went down to Crybaby Holler, man, they're tough, because you just don't do that.
I wouldn't do it.
That kind of stuff.
And you know what's really funny is as I sit here in the comfort of my office with this microphone on and lights on, I'm not scared of any stupid Crybaby Holler. But if it was nighttime and I was alone at Crybaby Holler, I would be scared.
One of the first dates with my wife, or it wasn't a date, we just went driving with some friends. There was this thing in Northport, Alabama, which is outside of Tuscaloosa, called the White Ghost or something. I forget what it was. But you go to this one road, and you cut off your lights, and you drive up this hill, and there's this white ghost that would emerge from the woods. And we're like, what? And so we went and did it, and it's totally real. And what it was is this person had this large, like, pillar at the end of their driveway painted white. And if you cut off your lights in your car, then your scotopic vision and your mesoscopic vision haven't merged yet. Yeah. And you see this white shadowy figure that moves across the road seemingly. It was very exciting.
I love stuff like that.
There used to be a book that they would read to us around Halloween in elementary school called 13 Alabama Ghosts.
Really?
And it was good, dude. Oh, it was good. One of them was like this courthouse, and this guy was being tried for murder, but he escaped, and he's in the top floor of the courthouse, and lightning strikes the courthouse while he's up there, and it burns the image of his face on the courthouse window.
What?
And like, even if they break the glass, it always comes back. There's always stuff like that.
What I love about those kind of legends, and this goes all the way back to Conversation 15 you and I had, famous Conversation 15, the one that ruined people's sleep, the sleep paralysis conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So all this stuff is spooky, but none of it has any kind of motive. Hey, you put a Baby Ruth out there and then a baby cries. Okay, I can tell that was written by an 8th grader. Because why? I mean, okay, that's scary and stuff, but why?
Unless it's true,
and also,
Matt.
Did you feed your baby
Unless
baby
it's true.
roots? Was the baby literate, so the baby knew that it's also a baby, and ironically, a Baby Ruth has baby in the name? And
are you making fun of my culture? Because
no,
Crybaby Holler is real.
Wrong. And I am not. We need to go to Crybaby Holler next time I'm in town. I want to know.
You'd have to hold my hand.
Dude, that stuff on the side of the road, though, that freaks me out.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like those.
I hate
because
that
then
stuff.
it's in my mind the whole time if I see anything. I saw a huge, biggest mountain lion I've ever seen. I saw just barely in the headlights as I was cruising by. I don't know, I think this was last winter. It was a beast. I thought, did I just convince myself to see a giant mountain lion? I'm going back. And yeah, sure enough, there was a giant mountain lion. But it was much more intimidating out of my peripheral vision, right on the edge of the headlights, than it was kind of identifying that I had identified it and retreating off into the weeds. I think there is something to how your vision works that makes stuff like that scary. Out here, one of the local legends that's a little more associated with a bit further south is the skinwalkers. Have you heard about this thing?
No, that's weird.
Okay,
By the way, I just found the Wikipedia page for 13 Alabama ghosts and Jeffrey, and it's totally a thing.
Well, I appreciate that you weren't lying to me.
Yeah.
I like stories like that. And again, I like to explore stories like that in the daylight when everything's fine. The skinwalker thing, it's something about like these spirit walkers that can move at the same pace as a car or faster. And one of the stories I heard was of this creature like spooking somebody who was driving, and then that somebody accelerated to get away with it. And they looked out their window, and this thing is running alongside them on this remote Utah highway. And yeah, I don't know. You hear a story
That's
like
a deer.
that one time. Yeah, you know.
That's a deer.
It's quite the deer. Antelope are pretty dang fast.
Crybaby Holler's real.
Okay.
Your stuff is bullcrap.
Of course my stuff is bullcrap. That's the fun of local legends. And then you got some monster that lives up in Montana in Flathead Lake. I'm sure it's a sturgeon.
There's YouTube footage of Crybaby Hollow.
Are you kidding me?
No,
That's
it's a
show
day,
notes.
so that's not going to be scary.
Lazy.
No, you go at night. We need to get a Sony Alpha A7 or whatever the super like can see in the dark camera is.
Yeah.
Golly,
I don't know if I
The
want to
Secret
do
of
that.
Crybaby Hollow. This stuff is. There's a book.
What?
This is bigger than Alabama. What the heck? There's a book, The Secret of Crybaby Hollow.
But it's in Alabama.
I don't know, man.
I don't know either. Maybe there are lots of them. Legends spread.
Mysteries. Oh, somebody wrote a book. Is what this is.
Yeah, you get parallel legends. Yeah, I'll go there during the day. I mean, I'll eat a king-size Baby Ruth there on that bridge during the day. But I'm not even eating a fun-sized one at night.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Anyway.
So here's the thing with the local legends. The end of Pilate's life is kind of interesting because there are a couple of fun local legends that go with him. And one is near Lyon, France, where the story goes that he went and lived out his life and died, apparently kind of obsessed with Jesus.
In France? Is France part of Rome at this point in time?
Yes, the region was called Gaul. So Charles de
Okay.
Gaulle is Charles the France, in a sense.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what Charles de Gaulle means. De means of. Charles of France. So Charles de Gaulle was like somebody from a long time ago. I thought he was like World War I or something.
Oh, no, yeah, he's recent. I mean, the airport there is named for him, right?
Yeah.
I was just saying that last name is indicative of a French heritage. That would be my understanding. Maybe I'm making a connection that's not there, but Gaul is France. So there's this other story that the emperor doesn't like Pilate when he gets back and gives Pilate the option to get executed or commit suicide, and Pilate chooses suicide, and then they throw his body in the Tiber River in Rome. But there are a bunch of demons and stuff that show up, and they create these whirlpools, these demon whirlpools, like in Hercules, where James Woods' Hades is ruling over the underworld. And they're like, oh, we can't have a rotting corpse in our river that summons demons. We got to get him out of there, boys. And so they fish him out of the river, and they're like, we should throw him in somebody else's
France?
river. No, this is in the Tiber River, so in Rome.
Okay.
And then they're like, let's put him in somebody else's river. Let's put him in the French people's river. So they take him to Gaul. They dump him in the Rhone River near Vienna, France, and the same thing happens. Demons, whirlpools, goblins, whatever they are. And so they're like, we can't have that going on in this river either. Let's
Okay, so
get him out of
you're
here.
not being super clear here, Matt. So these are local legends. And so these are who is saying these things?
Well, a lot of these stories flow from one collection of books about Pilate's later life in France, but there's also a parallel collection that have his later life happening in Switzerland and legends that surround what happened to him when he, according to them, died there. So
these are local people that hold these traditions.
Yes.
Not in Rome.
No, not in Rome. Though, I don't know, maybe some people think it in Rome. Who can say? So in Rome, there are a bunch of traditions. In Vienna, the tradition is that Pilate died there. They even have a kind of grave marker thing there in the middle of a street in the town. But then the Switzerland rumors are really fun. That legend has Pilate retiring near Lucerne in north-central Switzerland. And there's a mountain right there called Mount Pilatus. So it seems like there's some kind of historical connection here. But he goes up on top of the mountain named after him. He can't handle the guilt of killing Jesus. He commits suicide by drowning himself in this lake. And then every Good Friday, according to the local legend, he emerges and tries to wash his hands of the blood of Jesus as a ghost. But it doesn't work because he'll always be guilty.
That's interesting. So in Switzerland, they say that.
Yeah.
So I would expect that to have come there with the spread of Christianity to that area.
Yeah. So and Christianity wasn't there initially when all of this stuff went down, obviously, or within several decades. So it's got to be a later legend. But who knows? And that's kind of the fun of it. And that's what was fun to dig into also is once you get out past those first two rings of the dartboard, then you get into the crazy speculation. I mean, there's somebody who tells a story of Pilate having been born in Scotland and maybe ending up back there when he died. I mean, who knows? That's part of the fun when the trail goes cold. But it's also really fun to tromp through centuries of history and multiple languages to see how all these different little groups of people seized on the loose ends, the opportunity there with Pilate's life to make stories for themselves that included him. So that's it. It was a really fun video. I had a lot of fun putting it together and trying to understand this very difficult to organize tradition associated with him.
Do you think this changed you and changed like what you think and feel about Pilate and all this stuff you read?
Yeah, I mean, it affected how I think about Pilate. I feel like I understand the character better when I read the Bible. But you know what? How it really affected me was I honestly thought I would do this research over the course of about 2 days, and it took multiple weeks. I mean, a couple months is a better way to characterize the time I put into it. And every time I thought, now I have made the best bibliography in the world about Pilate and the Pilate tradition, I would come across some obscure nugget of scholarship, and I'd realize, oh, wait, nope, I don't know yet. And each additional layer of study, only as I did that additional layer of study was I equipped to know what I didn't know. And each time I thought I knew all this stuff, I would quickly realize, oh, no, I don't. There is a whole other level to this. And I think I got about 4 of those levels deep, and I think there are a couple of levels left, but at some point, you just got to get on to the next project, you know? It was humbling in terms of how scholarship works.
Well, have you thought about writing all this stuff down in like one big bibliography or like an article that explains? I mean, no offense, but this story you just told was kind of what's the word? It's like a scattergun. You were here and then you were there and then you were trying to tell me about his personality and you were trying to like I think I would benefit from saying this is what his personality seems to be from historical records and then from inference.
Well, then you might like my video on the topic.
Yeah. Have you thought about writing that down?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I could produce, but also this is something that you learn when you start to study history. Most of the really interesting history doesn't neatly present itself as a story the way we think of stories because of the way the data is presented to us. So we can either mingle tons of speculation to fill in the gaps and write kind of a historical novel and just hope people go and read the sources to figure out where we were fudging and filling things in. Or it is more of a fragmented parchment from the ancient world where you're missing a chunk here and you're missing a chunk here. And so the story unpacks a little bit differently. That said, I did publish the bibliography in my video and on my website. And yeah, it probably merits some kind of article. You just require fingers to keys, I suppose.
Have you ever used Medium?
No, I never have. You've talked about that once or twice, but Medium is not a medium I understand yet.
It's basically just a way to write a good-looking document easily.
Okay.
And someone told me one time, I mean, just think about this. Your video, moving forward, like if the ability to decode digital information in the form of videos goes away for whatever reason, you know, that may be lost. But if you have the ability to convert it to text and put everything in one place, I don't know. I think the level of scholarship that you put into this might warrant that.
That'd be fun. I don't think it would be that hard to do at this point in the game. Probably just need to take a long weekend and make it happen.
So I guess what's most interesting about all of this to me is to see you wrestle with this character that you meet in the Bible, but to see you do it with external sources from the Bible. You know, it's fun to watch you do your thing, like you've studied this text in the scripture for years, but it's fun to watch you do it through external sources. I don't know, I enjoy that because that coin in your pocket, I know it means a lot to you, but it also kind of means a lot to me. And I like knowing that there's other stuff that buttresses that up. I don't know. Am I weird to think that? Obviously not.
No.
I mean, I would guess you wouldn't think so, but
I don't think it's weird, and I appreciate your vicarious caring about it.
That kind of gives me hope. And I wonder what my friends that don't look at the Bible the same way I do, I wonder what they think about all this stuff. I would really like to see you write that article. I'm not saying you have to, but it's an important person in history, one way or the other. And as you told me in your video, you didn't mention this podcast, his name was on a rock, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. His name was on a rock. He's a real guy.
Yeah.
I tell you what for me is fun about stuff like this and why I like talking with you about it, even though I know sometimes the way that I dive into history is maybe a little overwhelming for you and not your first choice stylistically. I really appreciate that you're willing to engage with it because it is something that I care about a ton. But if you step back from all of the details of what you do and what I do, I think what we see is that we're both trying to gather data and figuring out how we know stuff and what we can know and what the limits of our knowledge is. And a project like this is really fun for me because it's all basically a big wrestling match with what can I know and what can I not know. And then ultimately it comes down to, can I be cool with those limitations? And so deep dive study like this, it does more than just deal with the topic at hand. It kind of pushes back on our own hubris and sense of what we can actually apprehend and what we can't. I enjoy that, and that's why I like hearing about what you do with the hard sciences and the stuff you're working on, because it really leads to the same conclusions. You can know this, you can't know this. These are the questions you have for further study, and it's a very human process, and I like sharing it with you.
And I think that's what's lost on a lot of society today is being able to admit those areas that we cannot know. I think that's super important. I think we're losing that. And so I think this exercise, watching you do this, was an exercise in watching a friend struggle with that. And I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. And thank you, not just for this conversation, but for checking in and keeping me sane for weeks on end as I grappled with these things.
Switzerland, a fountain.
It was needed.
It's like a ghost. It's like Crybaby Holler, the white thing. It's Pontius Pilate. This is fun, dude. I'm not making fun of you. Thanks for taking me on this journey with you, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being willing to come along.
Have a good one, buddy.
You too.